your research beneficial for those people, I would call them squatter camps, but you've called it an urban area?
The purpose is really to amplify their voices. Sometimes they remain invisible because they don't have a voice over political decisions.
Hello and welcome to PhD Hard Talk. Thank you so much, Elmond, for wanting to participate and have a conversation with myself. Could you please introduce yourself and your research?
Yeah, thank you, Norma, and I'm glad to be here to have a discussion with you about my PhD study and my broad, academic interests. My name is Elmond, and I'm currently a second-year PhD student at the University of Western Ontario in Canada. And my research focuses on urban governance, the geographies of street trading in cities of the Global South. And I'm also interested in issues of urban informality, issues of place attachment, and territorial stigmatization, urban poverty, urban inequality, and broader issues on urban development in cities of the developing world.
Thank you very much for that introduction. We'll have all the links for all the papers that you've published at the bottom underneath the video on YouTube for those who may be interested in such. So in terms of the Southern region, could you explain what that is for those who don't know?
It's basically the countries that are in the third world, are the developing countries, Africa, Latin America, Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. But my geographical area of focus is largely, Sub-Saharan Africa. Like, I'm from Zimbabwe, but I also do research, and that broadly covers, countries like South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, Mozambique, and in other countries. Basically, if literature review studies, but in terms of empirical work, I focus on Zimbabwe cities, particularly Harare, which is the capital of Zimbabwe.
Okay, brilliant. Which brings us next to the next point, which is your paper that we'll discuss today. It does link into Harare. So it is called, they say these are places for criminals. Is that correct? Or have I got that wrong?
These are places for criminals. Yeah, that's how it starts.
Why that? Because that captured my attention.
It's kind of signposting. The title is kind of signposting. So it is a direct quotation from, one of the participants. So it's a clear reflection of what the papers talk about. So, and it was also purposefully constructed like that to draw the attention of the reader, because we kind of thought, if we frame it that way, somebody will be interested in really reading the paper and understand, or try to understand what this paper is all about. Why, is it framed like a quotation, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I found that interesting, which brings me to ask, is your research beneficial for those people who are staying, I would call them squatter camps, but you've called it an urban area?
Yeah. My research, working with people living in informal settlements or squatter camps, as they are called in other areas, or slums in other contexts, is usually it is participatory, community-based. We know the purpose is really to amplify their voices so that they become visible to policymakers. Sometimes they remain invisible because they don't have a voice over political decisions. They don't have a voice over governance processes within a city. So, when I publish with my colleagues, it's just to give them space so that their voices become visible in the international, policy. When a policymaker, reads our article, they know and understand what are the issues in these particular communities, and probably they will be able to appreciate really, oh, this is the real life experiences that these people have to go through. So it's about giving them a voice, because they may not have an opportunity to express themselves in newspapers or in other, platforms.
So you're writing for policymakers, you're not writing for the individuals that are found in those squatter camps, essentially?
No, we want to amplify their voices. So we are kind of, advocates on behalf of these people. We write in, we are, when we're discussing, when we're doing research in these communities, we are going there with putting on a jacket of social justice, so that whatever experiences they share with us, we amplify that, because they don't have, like I said, they don't have an opportunity to participate, in policy discussions.
Okay,
right?
So in terms of your work, based on your methodology, it states that you were collecting the data from 2016 to 2018. That was the period in terms of when you were doing the field study. So since then, it's 2021. What has your work done to assist those that are, in that situation in terms of the squatter camps, slums, or the urban areas?
Like you correctly said, this, the paper is a product of a broader research project that was conducted between 2016 and 2018, and it was coordinated by the University of Sussex in partnership with the Development Governance Institute. That Development Governance Institute is a development research and consulting firm that is based in Harare. I was working with them at that particular time. So what this broader research project was all about is to understand, the challenges that people live. When people move to cities, usually they find themselves living in these deprived neighborhoods. What are some of the challenges that they're facing? Is when they move into those informal neighborhoods, does that create a pathway out of poverty, or they will remain trapped in kind of those conditions? So in terms of the actual policy impact, there may not be an immediate, intervention to say, oh, the city of Harare actually picked these issues and then they went there and addressed it. But we kind of make sure that these people, they're kind of heard. So our scholarship is really to make sure that we give these people a voice. They have their issues, heard or understood in the policy circles. Whoever is responsible for making decisions, be it councillors, be it planners, they have a clear understanding of what are some of the challenges that these communities face, so that in terms of their perceptions towards them has to shift. So I think increasingly we are beginning to see a change in the positive direction in terms of the attitudes of policymakers towards people living in informal settlements. Because in the past, so the city of Harare, for instance, usually, very negative attitudes toward these people, which often resulted in them being displaced. But we haven't had a lot of displacements, per se, in the recent years. So which sometimes is a demonstration that when people live in these kind of communities, they are an important contributor to the urban economy, and they're important. We need to consider them in our planning and development. So I would say, the purpose really is to make sure that we do research that kind of amplifies the voices of these people, because they're usually marginalized in terms of political decisions, in terms of governance. So we want to give them a platform. So we are advocating for them, because once we write these papers, we write it strongly so that it becomes relevant to policymakers in terms of planning and urban development.
I understand that you've written and you are passionate in terms of the change that you would want, but how did you actually get this information to the policymakers for them to implement change? Or you haven't yet, so you've just published your paper? Where are we there?
During the process of because I explained at the beginning that this was a large project that ran for 2 years. So during the process of collecting that data under that particular project, there were a series of engagements with policymakers. We're working closely with them. We're doing workshops, on an interval, like maybe after every 3 months, we convene a workshop so that we discuss the emerging issues from these communities, as a way of making sure that whatever insights are coming from these communities that are actually absorbed by policymakers. But the challenge, though, is sometimes I think in most sub-Saharan African cities, policy uptake is still a very big challenge. So sometimes you may not immediately see how the research that we've done is impacted or has changed the practice in terms of how things are done, in terms of how decisions are made and implemented at a city level.
Okay, so you mentioned the poverty line previously when you were answering me. So my understanding is that Harare is the capital city based on what you've told me, and I know that from general knowledge. But in terms of people moving to Harare when the economy is quite bad, why are they moving there to move to the squatter camps looking for employment when the economy is bad and there's high levels of unemployment? Are there other reasons why they're moving to Harare?
I think from it is basic knowledge, like when people move from rural areas to urban areas, because cities are generally considered as places of hope in terms of that is where you have to, employment opportunities, jobs, better services, help. But then when they come to cities, because of the rapid urbanization and the population of people living in cities sometimes exceeds the capacity of the municipality to provide some of those services. You find that the urban poor may not be absorbed in the formal urban, labor markets. And then what do they do when the housing policy becomes restrictive because they may not have resources to afford a decent housing? They find a piece of land and then they go and live there and then they start their life.
I understand that, but let me ask you this, Elmond. Would you move rural? Is that the countryside? Just so
Yep.
I understand. Okay, so would you move from the countryside in terms of the rural area to a city where you have no job, right? You have no employment at all. You haven't applied for a job, and then get there, build a home. What hope is there? Why have you moved? That doesn't make sense to me.
There is what is called the urban bias. People think that when you go to a city, there are always opportunities. That's the urban bias that is there. But when they move from the rural to the city, because they're saying, oh, we are living in the village, there are no opportunities, there are no jobs, there are no good services, there are no good roads, no good infrastructure. So when we go to the city, we're going to get, a good life, good opportunities, we're going to get some of it. And then when they get there, the situation is different, right?
Okay.
So you're migrating into a city with certain expectations. And then when you move there, those expectations may not be fulfilled.
So why not move back?
Because there might be push factors. You might have moved from a village because you have a very difficult, life circumstances, or you have very limited opportunities. You said, I have to, to find a way to survive in the city. Probably, if I try whatever I try, with time, I will be able to navigate the urban landscape. I'll be able to integrate and probably get a job and, and become part of the city.
So now, I mean, when you were conducting your research, I understand that, you were heavily involved with the policymakers, but I'm now thinking, right, we've got these people, they've come here because there's an urban myth that they'll get a job and life would be amazing. Did you take time to educate them to say, you have better scope where you came from than for you to stay in the slums, that, the sewage situation, I'm sure, is horrible, because if you're just building houses out of thin air, where's all of that going?
You can't easily convince people to say you can go back to the village. When we discussed with them in terms of one of the questions that we're asking them under the broader research project is where, their migration history in terms of where they come from. Some of these people have been displaced or evicted maybe 4 times, like moving from one place to the other, from slum to slum, but they didn't go back to the village. One one of the reasons is it's not just that some of them are coming from the villages, because they are very heterogeneous group. Some of them have migrated from, are descendants from, from countries like Malawi and so forth. They may not have a rural home per se, so they become sort of trapped in those kind of environments because they have nowhere to go. And the other reason is that, even if they know or understand that they're living in these very difficult conditions, some of them will tell me, like, the life that I'm living is probably better as compared to a village or so forth, because in a village I may not be able to get the small economic opportunities like to do, to work in the formal sector and hustle and probably try to make a few dollars from that. And then they try. And because like I said at the beginning that, they always live with this hope that things will get better. And one day I'll be able to, to properly integrate, to get a good job and live a decent urban life.
Yeah, but I find that difficult. So you've just mentioned Malawi. I know that in Malawi they've got a lot of water, so you can go fishing and sell the fish. So you've got an income there. So if you go back to a village, there's an income there. Same as, the people in Harare. If you're saying, they're refusing to go back, there's land, they can grow stuff. So why, it's not making sense to me. I understand that you're saying they've moved from one place to another, but it sounds as if some of them have got an addictive personality. They're just like
I don't think it's an addictive personality per se, because when you're talking about rural life, it's not as homogeneous as you put it, because some of them.
Rural life? Help me understand what rural life is.
Yeah, so these villages, so the rural communities where these people are coming from are very heterogeneous. Like some of the rural communities, like I said, they lack basic infrastructure and they don't have opportunities for. Even if you want to start a small businesses, some of them are not really accessible. You don't have the very small population. Some of them are really very isolated. Mm-hmm. So, if you are in an urban area, no matter where we are living, whether it's an informal settlement or what, some of these people will actually say, oh, this is better than where I came from. Because in my small village, it was very isolated. I didn't have access to these opportunities, the small shops and the bigger population that I can go and sell my products and probably make $5, and I'll be able to survive on a daily basis. You get what I mean? So, mm-hmm. so there are many different factors that play that tend to push or influence people to make these choices to say, I want to remain or I want to go back.
Right.
And one of them is the hopes that they attach to the city is so strong that they say, oh, it doesn't matter whether the city doesn't consider us as authentic or legitimate residents, but we'll remain and we'll do whatever we have to do until we make it.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but moving somewhere where you have no postcode, and staying there, knowing that you don't know where your breakfast is going to come from, or where your lunch is going to come from, it's a risk every day, you getting up or sleeping at night because you don't know if someone's going to come and attack you, and you opt for that option.
I think let me move this discussion further, because I think we are stuck at one place. Okay. And one thing that I want to emphasize or to talk about is these communities are not hopeless per se.
Right.
Right. And if you look at how I have framed the title of that paper is, mm-hmm. These are place for criminals, but we call it hope. Mm-hmm. There are two faces to this issue, right?
Right.
They are stigmatized. Mm-hmm. As in this is where criminals live, and by so doing, they are discursively, excluded from, urban policy. Sometimes there's no investment in terms of infrastructure. But what they have done, most of them, mm-hmm. is they have a very strong community solidarity.
Yeah.
And how do they do that? There are a lot of community groups that have come up in these settlements in terms of mobilization, in terms of self-help. So they put their resources together. Like there's what is called the Zimbabwe Homeless People's Federation. It's very active in these communities. So it's a community-based organization that, where people put resources together, like very small amounts. It could be $1 contribution every month or so. And some of them, not in all the settlements, but some of them have actually managed to mobilize themselves without, the help of external support. And then they try to improve. They do revolving funds. They borrow each other money. They do slightly incremental housing improvement. So, in as much as they have challenges, but they always have a way to solve them. It might not be, the big infrastructure is being developed and so forth. But at an incremental level, they have a way of organizing themselves. They have a way of dealing with their own challenges.
Okay, so basically they've become a community or maybe a tribe amongst the country to stand by themselves because they've got a common understanding when it comes to hope and also the urban myth. And therefore now they've started councils in regards to, sharing money to enable themselves to have a better future. Is my understanding right?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that
isn't that going against the norm in terms of a country? We have policymakers, we have the local government. You've mentioned about the local council as well. So why go against that? It's like you're creating more ammunition against that group indirectly.
No, that's not the way to put it. Okay. Because if I'm talking about, let me explain it in a very simple way.
Okay.
So we have people that are living in informal settlements, right? They're called informal settlements because they lack adequate urban services like water and sanitation, roads and so forth. People living there, they don't have tenure security. Sometimes they can be moved or displaced by the state and so forth. What happens is informal settlements. This is not just an issue of Harare only. But most cities in the global south, in India, in Latin America, in Brazil, and so forth, the challenge is everywhere.
Right.
So it's and it's even at a global level. They are recognized. There are even programs at an international level. UN Habitat has been doing a wonderful job to try and improve the lives of people living in these settlements. So it's not like when they do community-based or when they mobilize themselves, when they do self-help schemes, it's kind of they're going again. It's self-help schemes, for instance, they actually recognized as a way in which the urban poor provide for themselves. Of course, self-help schemes have got their own challenges. Sometimes the quality of infrastructure may not be as at par with what this local authority is providing. But it's a way of saying, okay, we have these issues. We don't have water. What do we do? Right? Because sometimes the city authority may not provide water, and it's not always that they don't have the capacity to extend the services to these communities. They may not decide to do so because they will say, "Oh no, we don't recognize these people." They say, "Let's come together and see how we can provide water for ourselves, see how we can improve our housing conditions." So it's not like they're going against this. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
When they do these self-help schemes or community-based mobilization, community, based, upgrading and so forth, slum upgrading and so forth, so at one point they've actually formed a memorandum of understanding with the city. I think that the project ran from 2010 to 2015. It was called the Harare Slum Upgrading Project, where it included the seat of Harare. It included the Zimbabwe Homeless People's Federation, which represents the poor living in these communities, and the local organization called Dialogue on Shelter, as a way of, okay, how do we help these people? They can provide labor, they can provide their own experiences and their resourcefulness. And then a pilot was done in one of the communities called Zorasekwa Extension. It was a slum, and infrastructure was upgraded, services were provided, and so forth. So it's not like it's something that is contrary to what the city wants. of course, the city may say, oh, we don't want people living in slums and so forth. But when they do partner to provide and upgrade, so it's a way of also improving their living conditions and so forth, so that they become part and parcel of the urban economy. That is what I would say. So it's not like, oh, we are going against what is normal, whatever. So they are part and parcel of the
whatever.
urban
No, whatever. No, I like that. But I guess for me, I've had to go on Google just to see what's out there, and I've gone on YouTube and I've seen the documentaries whereby, you know, in terms of Harare, that is, because that's where your paper is based. And I've seen them drive up, and you know, the way it's done, the eviction, it's not really nice. And I guess from that perspective, when I've seen the way those tractors are moving everything, I'm just thinking to myself, some people have young children, they're not safe at night, you know, when they come in early in the morning or at night. So I guess that's where my concern's coming from, to say, I can see the way you're moved, but you're still staying there. You're saying you've got hope. What hope do you have when someone's shoveling you out?
Yeah, that's the challenge we are still grappling with, and that's why we are here as scholars to try and, you know, make our work have an influence in terms of how policymakers make and implement decisions. One of the challenges that is still, you know, there in terms of how the city of Harare, you know, their attitude towards informal settlements hasn't really changed that much. Yeah. It is still negative, and that's why they kind of come up with these stigmatizing discourses as a way of trying to punish these people, because they say, oh, we want to create a modern city, and a modern city to them is a city that does not have informality in it, be it informal settlements, be it, you know, street traders or whatever informal sector groups. So the issue to me is, you know, how do you, you know, is about continuous engagement with these policymakers, so that their attitudes towards these communities have to shift. Because honestly, it is not possible to completely eradicate informality in whatever sector, be it housing, be it the economy. It is very difficult, because in as much as we still have these restrictive policies, we still have challenges with the urban, you know, urban unemployment. The challenge of informality will be very difficult to eradicate. So we have to think creatively about, you know, what are the different ways in which we can accommodate, we can engage with them, and you know, because like I've described about the, you know, the participatory slum upgrading project that I've talked about, it's globally, you know, advocated for by organizations like the UN Habitat, in terms of giving communities the power to, you know, to define their destiny in terms of how can they improve their living conditions, how can they improve, you know, their access to urban services, water and sanitation and so forth. So
I guess the answer to that, isn't it the government just providing more housing? In terms of that,
it has to do that, provide more housing, make policies more, you know, poor friendly. But then the challenge is always, you know, sometimes they always this excuse that, you know, we don't have the capacity or adequate resources to provide housing for everybody. And that's why sometimes
I would agree, though, to say, you know, in terms of what you've just said there, in Zimbabwe, the economy, there's no economy. So how can they build more housing?
No, I think that's a myth to say Zimbabwe there's no economy. There are a lot of very good potential revenue sources that has to be managed properly.
Keyword potential, but they're not being utilized at the moment due to lack of funding.
I think the biggest challenge we have in Harare, for instance, sometimes is the way, you know, the financial resources, the way the city manages its finances. There's no transparency sometimes, and it's always an issue of, it goes back to how do you manage your financial resources? How do you prioritize your municipal budgets in terms of developing the city? So, it could be an issue of, oh, the government says this, and there are other ways to do it. How do you bring the private sector on board to make sure that they can, how do you create incentives for private sector participation in providing affordable housing for the urban poor? So there are other ways that needs to be explored. So it's not an excuse to say we don't have money. There are creative ways to deal with challenges that that you are facing as a local authority. Yeah, you cannot solve everything. You have to find innovative ways to mobilize resources and deal with issues that you're facing.
Okay, so back to your research, as we're rounding off. You use the word discourse a lot. What does it mean to your research?
Yeah, discourse is let me put it this way. When we talk about discourses, these are kind of ideologies. These are kind of how people see, or how different people see different things in a different way. So if you look at that paper, we were talking about discourses in terms of, okay, what are the different ideological perspectives that planners, for instance, or politicians, for instance, have about informal settlement, right? Something that is, these are criminals. So the word criminals kept coming. The word criminals, so that becomes a discourse, and that becomes a basis upon which decisions are made. So if you say these are places where criminals live, the next thing that you think of is, let's go and destroy these settlements so that we get rid of the problem, right? So it's about ideology. It's about ideology within institutions, with individuals, whatever, at different levels, because the discourses themselves are a source of power in terms of how certain decisions are made, or how policies are shaped in a particular context.
No, thank you very much for explaining what discourse means. In terms of future-wise, what are your plans when it comes to further research?
Yeah, that's good. So that's a good question. So my plan really is to, I want to join the academia. I want to be a university professor, and kind of use my research to influence policy on urban issues in the global south. So I'll be, even though my primary career goal is to be a university professor, but I want to take my research further and make sure that whatever research findings I have, they have to find themselves beyond the academic journals, and develop policy brief, ways to engage with policymakers at different levels, and probably work or do advisory work with international development agencies and like the World Bank and so forth, so that how to explore different ways to improve lives of the urban poor in the global south.
No, that is amazing. Do you have any advice for anyone that's out there that's thinking, to do something similar in terms of research, be it university?
The most important thing in any research agenda is passion for the subject. You need to develop passion, because passion is what drives you to get out of your comfort zone and explore new ways of, how do I understand, how do I conceptualize these issues, how do I take my research forward, and make sure that I engage with communities and force and so forth. So it's about passion. It's about the passion to read, because reading a lot expands your knowledge, and in terms of your whatever field you are into, reading a lot, and be up to date with the literature, and the kind of debates that are emerging in your particular field. So that's also very helpful. And I think even within the academia, whatever, if you're doing a master's or PhD, of course, obviously you have a supervisor. And I think that kind of mentorship is very, very critical. And you need to tap into those mentorship opportunities, because some of these supervisors are really very experienced. And you can gain a lot from them, and asking questions, and if you see Even on most of my publications now, I do co-author with my supervisor, and it has been a very great experience in tapping into his knowledge and so forth.
No, I mean, it's amazing. I've read through only 3 of your publications, and I thought they were really interesting. And I guess that's why I wanted to have a conversation with you as well, based on what you've shared on the Tinternet. So I've got one more question. Why did you choose to come on PhD Hard Talk?
I thought it's a very unique way of expressing my ideas. PhD Hard Talk reached to me. I didn't know who they are, but I kind of thought, oh, this could be a good platform to actually sell my ideas and to get people know the kind of research that I do. So to me, it was also a way of also trying to improve the way I explain my research to people that even are not in my field. You get what I'm saying?
Excellent.
So I think it's kind of a very unique platform, because I don't think there's any platform out there that kind of try to give PhD students a platform to express themselves outside their university.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much for your response. So we've come to the end of our discussion. Hopefully we'll have a part 2, because you've got a lot of publications, and I thought that was amazing because I haven't published anything yet. So I was really interested in your work, and I think it does give back to the community based on what I've read thus far, and hopefully the policymakers, they're taking your work seriously as it is giving back. So squatter camps, they are a global issue. Be it slums, whichever way you look at it. In India, for example, the US, they've got squatter camps there. The UK, is troubled as well. Just to name a few countries there. So your work, it is beneficial in terms of the community. That's why we wanted to talk to you, as we can see that, the wider community needs to understand, your findings and why they are important in terms of giving back, and they can have a voice to champion what you found to make sure that there's a change in the communities that we live in globally. So thank you very much for undertaking your research. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in and listening to myself and pending Dr. Elmond have a discussion today. In terms of the next steps, please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and share and share. Now, we've got a new hashtag, hence the last question. So it's now project dissemination to the world. We want our voices to go out to the world so that there is a change and we make the impact. We're becoming scientists because we want to educate everybody and we want the world to be a better place. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the platform, and I hope that a lot of people will come on PhD Hard Talk to share their research to the world.
Thank you.